All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the late morning program with Namras. This is episode 33 with Her Grace Syamarani, Devi Dasi, and also known as Jadurani. Devi Dasi, I thank you so much, Mataji, for joining me here for this podcast. I'm so deeply honored. I just want to say one thing is that it was one of my bucket list items to meet you in Vrindavan that time when I met you last year. It was like a life's, bucket list item that I meet you. So I'm so glad I got to meet you, and I'm so honored that you agreed to come on the show. And so I'd like to start out with just talking a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what led you to your spiritual life, and ultimately to meeting Srila Prabhupada in like the early, the mid '60s, you could say, in the earliest part of the Krishna consciousness movement.
Thank you. And first, I want to say I feel very privileged to be here. I saw some of your podcasts. They're super excellent.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having me.
I'm so honored.
So in the 60s, I was one of the typical flower childs, I guess you could call it, anti-Vietnam War, peace and love and promiscuity and anti-parent and anti-government, looking for an alternative. And then one day I was walking through Tompkins Square Park and just on my way to a friend's house, and I saw Srila Prabhupada and about 10 of his first followers. He was sitting on a little Indian rug playing. This is before the mridanga time, so he only had this little dim-dim drum that you probably saw in the movie. And then Prabhupada stood up during the program and said, thank you all for participating in this Krishna consciousness movement. And then said, so go home and there's no loss. No one will tax you. No one will check you. There's no loss and the gain is terrific. Then they packed up, and I was thinking, because being a product of the 60s revolutionaries, I was also imagining that an alternative consciousness was marijuana and LSD. So I was on LSD that day. And when Prabhupada and his associates left, I just stood there and I was thinking, this person looks like he flew in on a magic carpet. And then just waiting for, because we were all Mayavadis at the time, waiting for the, inconceivable it to bring me to the next part of my spiritual journey. Then a man walked up to me and said, would you like to go to the temple? I didn't know what a temple was, but I said, sure, with confidence that this was led by higher forces. He took me to the temple. I met Prabhupada, and before I met him, I was downstairs in the temple room, and two brahmacharis were saying to each other, Swamiji has just said that when devotees have arguments, they see it like clouds passing by. Like when clouds pass by, you don't even notice it.
Right.
So arguments needn't be noticed. So then somebody asked me if I would like to come up and meet the Swami. So I went up, and I just noticed that he was reciprocating with everyone as everyone wanted to reciprocate with him, just as Krishna does. Then he said to me, do you live near here? And thinking that I was God, especially on that day, I said, oh, I live very near, because I thought I lived everywhere. So he said, good, then you can come to the morning program. So because Prabhupada is such a sankalpa, meaning that when he says something is going to happen, it happens. So I did begin coming. He was teaching Prahlad Maharaj in the evening, Bhagavad Gita in the evening, Prahlad Maharaj and in the morning, and then a month later he switched to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and every day he would leave us with a little cliffhanger. Tomorrow we will see what happened when. And then he would always serve glubjamins for breakfast that went along with our oatmeal. About a month later,
Wow.
I came upstairs after a program in which I was invited to come on stage with Prabhupada and all of his other followers. And then I went upstairs to bring some of the pots. And then Chudananda said to me, you're not supposed to be here unless you're initiated. So I was so flustered, I didn't know what to do. I just turned and saw Prabhupada in his room, and I said, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, being initiated. So he asked me if I could follow the 4 rules. I said, sure, even though I didn't know if I could. He said, okay, you can be initiated, gave a very soon day with one other devotee. And I was so new that I didn't even know his pranam mantra when I was initiated.
Wow.
And he had to say Nama, and I would say Nama, and he would say Om, Om.
Wow.
And he started me at a very low level. And but he knows the future, and he knew that everything would be okay.
Amazing.
On my initiation day, he gave me a copy of the first 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the only ones that he had, except he also had his Easy Journey to Other Planets little booklet. And so I was still so unsure that this was the right path for me that I said to him, well, if I change my mind, can I give the books back? And he said, yes. Why argue with me when he knew what was going to be happening in the future?
Right.
And then soon after that, he asked a devotee what was my talent. And I said art, even though I was a terrible artist. And so he told Prabhupada, and Prabhupada engaged me in making a copy of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan party in Navadvip at the courtyard of Srivas Thakur. And when I was in the middle of painting that, he came into the temple room, and he could have said anything because it was so bad, such a bad copy. But instead he said, Krishna has sent. And then he actually invited me to paint in his quarters. And I said, but the fumes are so heavy and toxic. He said, it doesn't matter. So then I began to paint in his quarters, in the room where devotees were cooking the Sunday feast, preparing the Sunday feast, and where Prabhupada would do his bells, playing the 2 bells to offer the boga and say various mantras, put on his tilak, where he'd pass around the achman cup and everyone would put on their tilak in front of him, and where in the next room he would dictate his teachings of Lord Chaitanya, take rest, greet guests, and that was the beginning.
Wow, amazing, amazing. So, did you have any previous art education or experience when you started to paint for Srila Prabhupada?
I always liked art, and I always dabbled in it since I was a young child. But just before I met Prabhupada, I went to Music and Art High School. But when I was in college, my second year of college, which was when I first met Prabhupada, the art department had a showing. So my artwork, of course, was up there. And I brought a friend of mine, and he said, which is yours? And I was trying to be funny, so I said, which is the worst one here? And he picked mine. So I was not a good artist at all. But still, because I liked it, Prabhupada engaged me in that service.
Amazing. It's amazing to see, because I remember that, because 26th Avenue, I think, still has a replica of that first painting that you did, and then now to what your art is. It's such an evolution. We'll totally get into that, but I'd like to ask you more about the process of creating your art. So is there a certain, like, because I know this last painting that you did, it took 11 years. Is that right? 11 years to paint that?
It took 11 years, but not consistently.
Okay.
Sometimes I stopped for years.
Right.
Sometimes I stopped for months. And sometimes I just painted and couldn't figure out how it was supposed to look, so I kept changing it. So between those three things, it took 11 years, and I just finished last month.
Amazing, amazing. So, like, what is the process of creating that art? Is there a certain type of difference? What's done differently, like in your life when you're creating art?
Well, of course, sadhana bhakti is a major technique. Chanting prescribed rounds, reading, hearing, trying to remember, trying to remember certain prayers while chanting, associating with devotees, that regular program that gives us strength in anything.
Right.
And so we follow a certain process regarding, technically speaking, a process that was gradually developed in the 70s. Like at the beginning, we were just copying paintings. And then when Prabhupada's books began, which was in 1969, he started writing us that now I want to do the Krishna book. And he gave the first list of 5 paintings,
Oh, wow.
like Krishna playing on the lap of Devaki, Krishna or Vishnu in the womb of Devaki, and the demigods offering prayers. In this way, he gave the first suggestions of what to paint. He did the same thing for Bhagavad Gita, and then both for the Krishna book and the Gita and the Bhagavatam, then he instructed us to pick out the pictures from the manuscripts.
Wow.
So we would gradually build up a repertoire of references, palaces, Indian types of trees, parrots, cows, and gradually begin taking here and putting it here.
Wow.
First, we'd have our sketch so that it didn't look like an artificial collage. And then fitting in with our sketch, we would find references that sort of matched. Also, we would make sure we have first the sketch of devotees posing, not just take a picture and then have it artificially put in the painting. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that it
yeah.
all flows, all
Amazing.
the parts of the painting flow. And so what we gradually developed, particularly in the 70s, this became a standard at the BBT. First, we would meet together, we all having read the manuscript of a particular painting, and then we would all do an idea sketch. That is, take 1 minute, literally 1 minute, to quickly put the whole idea on.
Wow.
And it wouldn't look great, but it would get the movement, the feel, the emotion. And then together everyone would decide which of the ideas sketches were the best for development. And then we'd each take some time, whoever was chosen for a particular painting, take some time to do a thumbnail sketch, which was overlaid over the idea sketch, but with more time and thought. And then we would meet together and critique each other's work. And then we would do the development sketch, overlaid which was the detailed sketch, the color sketch, and then finally going on the canvas. So that even before going on the canvas, we knew what we were doing, rather than starting with a nose in the middle of the canvas, and then after 2 weeks you have to change everything. Does that make
Wow.
sense? So there's an
Yeah,
actual
totally.
process.
Amazing, amazing. Wow. Wow. So, So how long would it take in those days to finish? Like I saw in this book. Let me just talk about your book for a second. So for those of you who don't know, Mataji has written a book, The Art of Spiritual Life. This is a memoir. And so in this book, she describes, and there's also different pictures of all the different paintings and the evolution of it, and just it's just an amazing book. So how long would it take when you have like so many artists working on a certain piece of art? How long would it take to finish a certain piece? I mean,
Well, that
you probably have a deadline, right?
Prabhupada was like the most deadline person I've ever met. For the Krishna book, he established a an assembly line for both the press workers, that is, who was working on the words, and for the artists. So for the artists, there were three of us to begin with. Later on, it became more artists. So Bharadwaj would lay out the composition and do the first layer on the canvas. Then I would develop it further, and then Murlidhar would put in the details, like flowers, fingernails, jewelry.
Wow.
So we would each have only 2 days. And so although it would take 6 days for a painting to come out, two, two, and two,
Yeah.
every 2 days a new painting came out. Wasn't that ingenious
It's
of
amazing.
him? And then later on, when we didn't have that kind of deadline, and when we were all doing our own paintings, it took sometimes a couple of weeks, sometimes a month, depending on how much Prabhupada was pressing us. For example, for the Chaitanya Charitamrita,
Hmm.
as you might know, he pressed all the press devotees to do 17 volumes in 2 months.
Right.
So it was a day, night, and some artists would start a painting, other artists would finish it. And we wanted to do better and take longer. But Prabhupada said, when you're dressing for the ball, if you keep dressing, dressing, and dressing, you might miss the ball.
Wow.
So do whatever you can in the allotted time, and later on you can come back and make improvements.
Amazing. Wow. That's amazing. So like how did the like from when you painted at that time to what you're painting, how you're painting now, what would you say is like the difference?
Well, now I use exactly the same process that we developed back in the 70s, the same system of idea sketch to so on and so forth. And although in the time of my Shikshaguru Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj, there wasn't an art department per se where everyone lived together
Right.
and worked together. Each artist could have been in different countries and working on different books. But whoever was around me, I would ask them to give criticism and advice.
Hmm.
And there would also be deadlines. He also has books which he said were complementary and supplementary to Srila Prabhupada's books, and like puts a spotlight on them so that we could see Prabhupada's books more clearly. And so we had deadlines for that. So that could have taken a month or a couple of months. But this Kunj Kirtan painting, which took 11 years, I didn't have a deadline because he gave me the instruction to do it shortly before he left the vision of the world.
Hmm.
And so I didn't feel the pressure of whatever it looks like by next week. That's the way it goes. And that's also why it dragged on so long.
Wow, wow, wonderful, wonderful. Um, so like for example, like now we have different devotee artists, now younger people taking on art. So what do you is there something that you do to train others in art, or what do you feel is the importance of training the next generation of devotee artists?
To tell you the truth, Prabhu, the generation that came after us in the BBT, America, the
Hmm.
next generation was Russia.
Oh,
And to me, they're like so much superior to my work. So The only training,
that's your humility as
no,
well.
the training that we gave them was in 1993.
Oh,
I
okay.
was invited by the GBC of Russia to come there and train the artists for painting for Russian translations. And so I taught them the system that we developed at the BBT, for how the devotees sit together and then this stage, that
Oh,
stage,
okay.
that
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they were already super excellent.
Wow.
So they just needed a process. And then the other thing they needed was references, Indian references, because the general tendency is to paint according to my country's culture. So that
Right.
Russian Krishna and Russian Radha and Russian palaces.
Mm.
So we gave them a kickstart on all kinds of Indian references, Indian prints, like you get in Loy Bazaar,
Mhm.
for clothing, for features, facial features, anatomy.
Mm.
And then they just took it from there and they were super excellent. And then I came a couple of times after that and gave comments. But basically, it was their own acumen and sincerity. So, as far as the value of training artists, there's so many artists out there, and I'm sure they're getting
Mm.
trained by so many people. But of course, Prabhupada would write us so many letters about the importance of art. For example, he said that Krishna's philosophy must be illustrated, but it must be according to the parampara revelation of the absolute truth. And when we were off on that, he would say to me, particularly, "You've ruined my books. You made Krishna and the gopis look like a hippie plaything."
Wow.
And I would make
Can
their
you,
hair too long.
oh,
And
okay. I was going to ask, can you give an example
I
of
sure
when that
can.
happened?
Well, in the Nectar of Devotion, it's stated that Krishna's hair looked like he was being embraced by the goddess of fortune. So you'd imagine that it was very long. And then when Krishna and the gopis were dancing in the rasa dance, their clothing and hair became loosened. And that's what I did. But Prabhupada didn't like that. He liked devahutis, if you've seen that in the original Krishna book. She just did a copy of an Indian print, but he said, "This I like because it's very sophisticated and grave. It's not like a hippie plaything." Another example is when we had the assembly line, the first devotee who was on the assembly line, I don't know why, but he would paint this big afro long hair.
Mhm.
And so naturally, me as the second person and then the third person would follow suit. And because he was the best of us technically, I thought, well, I'll just follow him. And then Prabhupada was so angry when he was looking at the pictures. Ramaswara Prabhu, who was at that time the BBT trustee, he was showing Prabhupada the changes that we wanted to make. And with these changes came the long hair. Prabhupada was shaking the press signatures and said, "This is ruining my book. They are hippies. Who's responsible for this?" And he picked out certain pictures that was like that. And he said, "Don't keep it in the book." He also didn't like when we substituted even less high standard paintings for more high standard paintings if they didn't fit the pastime. Like we proposed changing Vasudev carrying Krishna across the Jamuna with another painting that didn't tell the pastime, that was
Mm.
more general. So Prabhupada said, these are our ISKCON trademarks,
Mm.
ISKCON mottos. So how can you change it? So Ramaswara said, well, here, in this case, Anantashesh wasn't there behind him, as it says in the Krishna book.
Right.
So Prabhupada said, so put him in. So Ramaswara said, well, at this stage, we can't. He said, so leave it. But later on, so many years later, Ramdas Prabhu, he made a very beautiful one that was just very exquisite and with Ananta. So of course then it was okay to replace. And when Prabhupada saw me in 1976 in Mayapur, he said to me, "Are you still the first thing he said, "Are you still painting Krishna with big bunches of hair?" And I said, "No, Prabhupada." He said, "That is advancement."
That's wonderful. I noticed that the style of painting is like a more realistic or Renaissance style. Is that the style that Srila Prabhupada personally liked it to be?
Well, when you say Renaissance, let me tell you a story. He gave me a picture in 1968 of Narada Muni that he ripped out of a old Indian Hindi Srimad Bhagavatam, and he asked me to copy that, so I did. And he said that was first class. But then when I wanted to do a second one for the Boston Temple, I thought, well, I just saw an exhibition in New York. They were showing the Mona Lisa, and people were lined up for blocks. So
Wow.
I thought, well, I want to do it in that style because then people will be lined up for blocks to see Krishna paintings. So I went to the library and got some references of Jesus Christ, how he was so muscular, and with that Jesus Christ style dhoti, and put him in a redwood forest. And when Prabhupada saw that, he said, this is the meat eater's conception of beauty. Muscles and gaunt cheeks. Before, the first painting you did was the milk drinker's conception of beauty.
Oh,
So he
wow.
rejected when it got too Renaissance.
Oh, I see.
He was pleased that it looked realistic, but not to get out of the of that Indian Loy Bazaar print kind of innocence and Indianness and traditionalness.
Right, because the Renaissance style is like a lot of the muscles are very, it's very much detailed in that way. And
Yeah. And
okay.
also just Western type of clothing and Western type of backgrounds.
Right,
So
right.
he didn't want us to imitate them.
So what would you say to artists now, devotee artists who want to develop their art for Krishna as a service? What advice would you give them?
Well, I would suggest to associate with bhakti artists who are experienced and perhaps already book publishers, book painters, and to copy, depending on where they're starting from, to copy Krishna art that's bona fide and that's excellently done, first copying, and then to break out and do their own compositions. And to also especially copy faces and anatomy. And again, it depends on who the artist is and how much they already know.
Right, right.
And then there are certain paintings that Prabhupada didn't like, but many he did like. So if they want to ask us, any of the BBT artists or any bhakti artists, Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj's artists, like which ones do you recommend that I like all these particular ones. Which ones do you recommend that I do and don't do to copy? I don't know if that helps. It really
So
depends.
you're saying basically to take guidance when it comes to putting out your final piece, like you develop it with some guidance.
As in anything.
Right, as an yeah. Let's change gears a little bit and
Okay.
let's talk a little bit about ISKCON, because you've been ISKCON for so many years. And then
54.
yeah, amazing. You're the most senior lady disciple of Srila Prabhupada who is alive at the moment. What was ISKCON like after Srila Prabhupada's departure? Let's start there.
Let's start there. Can you be more specific?
Yes. So because I want to eventually go into your introduction with Srila Narayana Maharaj. So I wanted to kind of set the environment of what was it? What was the feeling like being such a close disciple of Srila Prabhupada and knowing him for so many years to then finally have that sun sort of set and maybe another sun or another sun to arise? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, at first, because I have a very envious nature, and I heard that Prabhupada had appointed these 11 gurus, I was upset that why didn't I get appointed? Natural for an envious conditioned soul. Gradually, then I tried to follow all the edicts and policies and hierarchies and the zonal acharyaship, but eventually I found myself not able to live in that context. And so and also the other artists by that time, they had gone to Italy to train a whole new generation of artists in Italy for Prabhupada's books. So at first I was, working as one of the leaders of the ladies Sankirtan and Brahmacharinis, but then I found myself unable to relate with the new systems and policies. So I knew that I wanted to keep painting for Srila Prabhupada, although I didn't know in what context. So I left and went to art school for 1 year. And then I rejoined in the St. Louis Temple. And at that time, there were being reprints for Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion and also the translations of Hridayananda Maharaj. So whatever I learned in the art school, which made me able to do a whole painting again without the assistance of all the other artists. So then I began painting for that, but still I was unsatisfied. I felt there was a little bit of a wall between me and Prabhupada, and I wanted that completely knocked down. Like I wanted to have a much deeper relationship with you. And I'm not in alignment with the hierarchy that I'm experienced to get to you. So going from temple to temple, then finally in 1990-91, I was just literally crying to Prabhupada that please connect me with you in a much deeper way. And then the last instruction that Prabhupada had ever given me was to make picture books of all of his books. He said, just like the Gorakhpur Gita Press, they have Bhagavad Gita in pictures, Bhagavatam in pictures. So I want all my books in pictures. So in 1992, I went to India in order to take photos for picture book project. And there, my god sister Aditya asked me, would you like to meet a Mahapurush? So I said, well, okay. And so she brought me to see Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj. And I saw that this was in his Rup Sanatan Gaudiya Math temple in, where is it? Sevakunj area. So then I saw that there were already so many ISKCON devotees there. I thought, well, gee, maybe I'm just missing out on something. So I started to hear him. And what I noticed was, since I had been crying for a whole year, Prabhupada, please connect me with you, so much so that all the walls are broken down so that I have a much deeper relationship with you. So he started explaining Prabhupada's glories in such a way that I'd never heard before, and explanations from Prabhupada's books and lectures that fully satisfied my desire to go deeper into Prabhupada's words. And also Prabhupada's personality, because I once said to him, to Srila Narayana Maharaj, when I hear the word Prabhupada, it's like, and we used to get chastised for not saying Srila Prabhupada. First it was, Swamiji, and then Prabhupada. If you don't say Srila, forget it, you get yelled at. And so I was saying to Srila Narayana Maharaj that I feel like, oh, he's so high, I'm so low. I feel like there's a wall there between me and Prabhupada. Basically, I think because of all my offenses over the years, you get slack. So first he said, no, don't fear. Think of him as your pran priya saki. Now that was a new one to me because I had always heard and preached. In fact, I mostly preached more than I heard that Prabhupada is a coward boy. Whereas Srila Gurudev, Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj was giving so much evidence from all the scriptures, from the teachings of Rupa Goswami, from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, from who Prabhupada took sannyas from and what was his sannyas mantra, and who were the acharyas whose commentaries he was using in his books. He gave so much evidence that Prabhupada is a gopi, but a particular kind of gopi, that is the maidservant of Srimati Radhika. And so he said, think of him as your pran priya saki. And he taught us verses from various scriptures like Archana Padati to Sri Guru in that form.
Mm.
And then I said, well, how can I think of the word Prabhupada itself in a more intimate way? So he said, Prabhu is Krishna, but Prabhu has two halves. There's the Krishna half, and then there's the greater half, who is Sri Radha. So Pada means at the lotus feet. So he who is at the lotus feet of Krishna and Radha, but with a leaning towards Krishna. With a leaning towards Radha. And then he showed, and then whenever I looked back in Prabhupada's books, it became so obvious that that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. This service to Srimati Radhika, which is what Srila Rupa Goswami and all of his followers came to give. So he said, Prabhupada means Prabhu is Krishna and Radha, but Prabhupada is with a leaning more towards Radha, and who has a very beautiful dress of a gopi with beautiful braids that are decorated with flowers and ornaments. So he helped me so much on the philosophical way with Srila Prabhupada in understanding his words. Just like Prabhupada, let's take Upadeshamrit. Srila Rupa Goswami wrote how many verses? 12 verses in Upadeshamrit, like that. And then Prabhupada's Upadeshamrit is like 100 pages. So he didn't change any of the meanings of Rupa Goswami, but he opened it up. Let's take Srimad Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami. The door is practically just slightly opened as to the message of the Bhagavatam. First, without Sukadeva Goswami, we have it shut. Nothing. And Vyasadeva, of course. Then he opened it up just a drop. And then you have Viswanath Chakrabarti Thakur, Jiva Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, expanding so much on the deep meanings behind Sukadeva Goswami's words. And then you have the more contemporary, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and other more contemporary acharyas explaining their words. So similarly, just as Prabhupada expanded on Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita, so Srila Gurudev in his explanations of Prabhupada and in his books, he would open up new vistas. And then when you go back there, oh my God, I can't believe I haven't seen them. He said like Prabhupada's books are like a treasure chest, and that's for the whole world. The whole world benefited and is benefiting and will benefit by Prabhupada's books. But then within that treasure chest, there's another treasure chest that's locked, and it's has more valuable jewels than the bigger treasure chest. So that treasure chest, the key to that treasure chest is in the hands of the Mahabhagavat on the same level as he who gave the treasure chest. So in that way, Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj gave us many deeper understandings of Srila Prabhupada's words, personality, books, and therefore, my love for Prabhupada increased, and therefore my love for Srila Narayana Maharaj also increased for being the giver of that.
Mm.
And I asked him once in Los Angeles, I said, Guru is one, we hear in the scriptures, but I had two gurus in this life. Prabhupada is my Diksha Guru, and you're my Shiksha Guru. So how is that? He said, Krishna is one, but he became millions in the rasa dance, but he's one person.
Right.
So Diksha Guru and bona fide Shiksha Guru, bona fide Diksha Guru are both manifestations of Krishna. One is manifestation of Krishna's form, and one is manifestation of Krishna's personality, but we know there's no difference between Krishna's inside and outside.
Right.
So he just opened up my connection further.
That's so wonderful. Some devotees might have issue to that, in the sense of that some may say that Srila Prabhupada only came to teach the basics, and maybe there was something lacking in his teachings. So, what would you say to someone who said that?
I would say that they haven't. I'd ask them if they've read Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita, if they read Prabhupada's Krishna book, and if they read Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion, and if they read Prabhupada's Upadeshamrita, the last verses of which talk all about Radhakund and how that's the goal of life, and how any person who has any intelligence would want to be there as the ultimate goal of life. Now, in 1976, there was a strange group that was formed called the Gopi Bhav Club. And they all wanted to be gopis. And they invented a process that they got from the Radhakund Babajis. And they were meeting in secret.
These were ISKCON devotees.
ISKCON devotees. And so when Prabhupada found out about that, he completely put it to a stop. He said, you're getting from the Sahajiya Radhakund Babajis. You're not following any process. They said everything came from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So unless Prabhupada's books had the highest information, how are they going to start their Gopi Bhava Club? I mean, this is to answer your question about he only gave the basics.
Right.
So Prabhupada said, yes, that is our goal, to become gopi. But how to become qualified? You're just making up your own system. First deserve, then desire. Because it is the desire that all of our acharyas came to teach us, to desire for that. If we see their books, their prayers, it's full of, please make me your maidservant. And so in Narottam Das Thakur, Raghunath Das Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Lochan Das Thakur, everybody. So Prabhupada cut the whole thing apart. One, because they had not only no guidance, but the wrong guidance. They were not doing a balance of the different parts of Prabhupada's books. And thirdly, they were trying to be the wrong kind of gopi, because the conditioned soul can never become a gopi like Lalita and Vishaka, who have a direct relationship, because what's the sadhana? You just get lusty. But rather, in the line of Rupa Goswami, as Rupanuga, Prabhupada said, we are all Rupanuga. We want to become the maidservant of Srimati Radhika. So, and what to speak of Nectar of Devotion? Oh my God, Ancha Leela chapter 14, Adi Leela chapter 4, Rai Ramanand Samba, they're so high. And he talked about Raganuga Bhakti everywhere. Sometimes because he used English words, because, he's coming to an orgy-based society of animals, trying to bring them to back to home, back to Godhead. So a lot of times he gave the English words, and he'd talk about spontaneous devotion, or devotion that doesn't depend on the rules and regulations, the forced rules and regulations. And sometimes we can see in the Bengali or in the Sanskrit, he's talking about Raganuga Bhakti. So I forgot why I said that. So he's talking about it.
Right.
It's just that we need somebody to help us unlock the thing.
Yes.
Because it had to be locked at first because of the level that we were on.
I see. Okay. Did you face any backlash from devotees because of associating with Srila Narayan Maharaj?
Well, I sure did, Namaras Prabhu. First, um, first, let's see. I don't know if I'm going to go in order, but since even before I started coming to hear from him, you know, my godbrothers who were already hearing from him, they were already getting backlash, and people were making up stories that they were wearing saris and things when they went to see him. And then in 19 so the ISKCON management were talking about it year by year. Should we let this go? What's going on here? Is this Sahajya? So finally in 1995, they had a resolution that anyone who's hearing from, seeing, hearing the tapes of, reading the books of Srila Narayan Maharaj will get kicked out of ISKCON. So they have to make a choice of ISKCON or him. So at first I told him that I don't want to leave him. I want to stay with him. So he was testing me, and he said, oh, if you stay with me, I won't be able to help you with your bhajan or your prasadam or your residence. But it was just a test. He said, go back to ISKCON, but don't be attached to money, position, or management. So right away, I was called in by the local GBC in Vrindavan, and because I expressed that I wanted to cooperate, they shipped me off to Kurukshetra to live with an Indian family so that I wouldn't be contaminated by being too close to Srila Narayan Maharaj's temples and having too much of a ease to go there. And then they shipped me off to America, to Columbus, Ohio, so that I would really be far away.
Oh my God.
And then then I had to I was there, and I would like keep his books under the cover and kind of read them privately and kind of hear his tapes privately. But then I would hear so much blasphemy of him in the temple. I was working the whole year, besides preaching and giving classes and distributing books. I was working on my memoir that you just held up,
Right.
my experiences with Srila Prabhupada. But then in 1996, I was a year after the original ban of him, and anyone who wanted to see him, they would also get excommunicated. At that time, they also banned him from coming to any of his temples, their temples, although he had been welcomed for many years. And it was interesting because whenever he went to the temple in Vrindavan, like there'd be thousands of devotees. He could barely walk. They'd just be so surrounding him. So then they started preaching that he's different from Prabhupada. He says opposite things to Prabhupada. He belittles Prabhupada, and so on and so forth. And so then I didn't have any money, but a friend of mine was going to England, so she took me with her. And at the same time, Srila Narayan Maharaj was beginning his world tour, so he was in Holland. And then another friend of mine got me a ticket to Spain. And then I was just going crazy because the ISKCON management were coming to visit me and telling me how, just saying so many blasphemous things. And so because I had accepted them as my authorities for so many years, I was kind of bewildered. Am I doing the right thing or not? So when I was in Spain, my head was like completely exploding. Srila Narayan Maharaj or ISKCON. Srila Narayan Maharaj or ISKCON. And then the explosion was getting more and more explosive until finally I thought I was going to die. There was this major explosion. And then I felt supreme peace. And then the words came to me, Srila Narayan Maharaj is in ISKCON. So then I realized what I had actually been learning from him and from Srila Prabhupada all these years. Like, what is ISKCON? because people say Prabhupada said, don't leave ISKCON, and you left him, and you left ISKCON, and you went to another
Right.
institution. So, like, what is ISKCON? So, and I have so many quotes from Srila Prabhupada explaining what is ISKCON. Who's the first ISKCON guru? Can you say? Brahma, Lord Brahma.
Lord Brahma, okay.
And who's the second ISKCON guru? Narada.
Mm.
And then who's the third is Vyasadeva,
Right.
Madhva.
Madhva,
And then,
right.
and then in that song that we sing, the Guru Parampara song, Krishna
Right.
Hoiti Chaturmukha,
Chaturmukha, yeah.
they're all our disciplic succession of ISKCON gurus. Then in the time of Rupa Goswami created the Vishwa, what is that? Vishwa Vaishnava Raj Sabha, which is ISKCON in Sanskrit.
Oh.
And then he gave the first presidency to Jiva Goswami. And then it continued down our line. And then it came to Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who named it Gaudiya Mutt. And then when there was problems in the Gaudiya Mutt, after Srila Prabhupada's departure, Srila Prabhupada's sannyas guru, and who's also his godbrother, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj, he established the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, and there were 3 signers of that, the paper for the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, and our Prabhupada was one of the 3 founding signers,
Wow.
founding members. And then Prabhupada came to America in 1965. He was the signer in 1941. Then he took sannyas from Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj in 1959. Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj is the Diksha Guru of Srila Narayana Maharaj. And so they've had, our Prabhupada had association with him since 1946 as very intimate friends, and he accepted Prabhupada just like he accepted his Diksha Guru. He accepted Prabhupada as his Shiksha Guru. So then Prabhupada came to America and gave the English translation, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti is also the Hindi for International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
Wow.
And so, then Srila Narayana Maharaj is also ISKCON. See how they're related. Prabhupada came to America because he was able to take sannyas from his sannyas guru, who's the Diksha Guru of Srila Narayana Maharaj. Right. So he's also ISKCON. Srila Bhakti Ballabh Maharaj is also ISKCON. Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Goswami Maharaj is ISKCON. ISKCON is much greater than sometimes we think it is.
Right. I like that.
Anybody who's following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions and Srila Rupa Goswami's instructions is factually ISKCON. In fact, in the Nectar of Devotion, in Prabhupada's original manuscript, this was told to me by one of his original editors, Matiladish Prabhu, my godbrother, that in the original version, Prabhupada wrote, anyone who doesn't follow the principles of ISKCON or any other spiritual society like that is living in a phantasmagoria or hallucination, something like that. And so whoever was the final editor made that into anyone who's not in ISKCON. So Prabhupada had so many different teachings for so many different disciples according to our qualification. So one, he might have said, don't go outside the walls of ISKCON. Another one, he wrote to his godbrother, Srila Bhakti Dvait Madhav Goswami Maharaj, yes, if my disciple so-and-so wants to take second initiation from you, I give that all blessings. And Prabhupada used to visit his godbrother's mutts very often. And in the olden days, somebody from one institution would go and get a sack of potatoes from another one, and it wasn't so sectarian as things are now.
Right. I read in your book that it was like someone was giving an explanation, like if you're playing a football game. Could you explain that?
Yes, let me.
It's like if you're in a football game and there's two teams playing, they
Right,
play and they're against each other in the game, but then after the game, it's
they're really friends,
right, they're
and
friends.
yeah.
Yeah, could you please elaborate on that? I
Let
just
me
love that
see.
point so much.
Yeah, I wish I had looked for it
I'm sorry.
more recently.
Yeah, I was just
It would be in 1977, which would be Prabhupada's last. Um, I say last, but that was one of the things that attracted me to Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj,
mhm,
is that he so much gave us an increased um, presence of Srila Prabhupada. Like he would say, just like when Krishna left the rasa dance, but he didn't really leave. He was hiding in any of the kunjas
right,
just to watch their devotional sentiments,
right,
to increase their devotional sentiments and to watch them so that he would be more overwhelmed.
right,
So he
right.
said, similarly, your Prabhupada is watching everything you do. So this is from Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Goswami Maharaj.
Okay. Could you
Says,
please briefly explain who that is?
yes, Srila Bharati Maharaj is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, Srila Bhakti Dwait Madhav Goswami Maharaj. And several thousands of Srila Prabhupada's disciples and Srila Gurudev's, Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj's disciples, and other Acharya's disciples came to take shelter of him. Srila Narayan Maharaj left the vision of the world in 2010 in December, and then many of his followers went right to Srila Bharati Maharaj for the same reason that we went to Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj.
Right, right,
And so I also spent a few years with him.
right.
And so he's like one of my Shiksha gurus.
Wonderful.
So he explained the whole thing that you were just explaining.
Yeah.
Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada's disciples had close relationships among themselves, and they were intimately related in their heart. One speciality that was common to them all was that they would always speak Hari Katha whenever they met. They used to speak Hari Katha constantly for hours. I heard Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj speak such Hari Katha that one could not imagine. We saw many of the disciples of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur fighting amongst themselves with litigation, but this is like Krishna and Arjuna fighting with Bhishma. Both are fighting, but they are both devotees and both are pleasing to Krishna in their own way. Arjuna gave great pain to Bhishma by making him lie on a bed of arrows, and yet Bhishma would only accept water from Arjuna. Then Arjuna shot arrows into the ground to bring water. Arjuna felt he had made an offense and wanted to apologize, but Bhishma Dev didn't feel like that. He was appreciating Arjuna. This is your football. Another example is that if two friends are on opposite sides of a football game, they will not take care of each other's interests in the game, even though they are friends. Each will follow the interest of his own team. However, they don't become enemies when one of them wins or loses. Again, two advocates engage in hot debate in the courtroom, and ultimately one of them wins the case. After it is over, the other one says, "You have won, so now you will have to treat me to prasadam." This is the way of relationships between godbrothers, but someone else may judge by the outward actions and think that advanced devotees can be enemies.
Wow. I am still not I don't understand why there was this ban put on in 1995. I just and it's still to this day I feel it's continuing on. Like I just want to say, uh, to advertise for this podcast, I posted this on a few ISKCON pages, and I got a message saying that because now things have moved to online, and there is still this resolution of not hearing from others who are not within ISKCON, then I'm going to have to ask you to take it down. And I was so surprised by that how is this still continuing to this day, even though time has gone on. And I just want to know for my own self, how do I navigate that? How do give us a little bit of your insight on that, please?
I'll try. Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj explained, if someone has sufficient sukriti, means spiritual pious merits from many births, then no one can stop him from getting higher association for his advancement in bhakti. Higher association means not someone who talks about the gopis. Higher association means those who are really pure devotees from anywhere. Because in the if I could just deviate just a drop,
sure.
In the Bhagavatam, it states, we can see in Prabhupada's translations, Mahatvara Mahor Bimukte. There are two doors, one door leading to liberation, one door leading to the darkest region of ignorance. By associating with Mahatmas, one goes to liberation. By associating with sense gratifiers, one goes to the darkest region of ignorance. So there's no mention of institution there. It's wherever you can find. In fact, Prabhupada named ISKCON, he said, I've named the Krishna consciousness movement based on this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bhakti Bhavati Rasa Bhavita Mati. That means basically it's in a discussion between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Rai Ramananda, that millions of births of spiritual pious merits or activities of Vaidhi Bhakti will not get one to Braj Bhakti. But if one has greed, and that greed comes from hearing from the pure devotee, then he can attain the highest stage of life, which is Braj Bhakti. So Prabhupada said, and I have several quotes about this, that I've named the Krishna consciousness movement after this verse. Krishna consciousness means greed, the greed for Krishna. Even when I was first joining him in 1966 at 26 2nd Avenue, he quoted Srila Rupa Goswami. He said, if you want Krishna consciousness, there's only one price for that, and that is the anxiety to have it. And that greed means I'm not interested in anything else. If I see a piece of chocolate cake in front of me, I can't think of anything else at the moment. So that's greed for bhakti. So that means you lose all your material desires because you feel like a fish out of water. Remember that prayer of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Madhya Lila chapter 2, where he says that people say that I'm a great devotee because I'm always crying, but actually it's just a show. Even though I have not seen the face of that flute player, Krishna, I'm still maintaining my life just like an insect with no value. But someone who really has a greed for Krishna, he's like a fish out of water. If I don't get the water, I'll die.
Right.
So, now why did I mention all that? Right, so if one has, so Prabhupada said this is the standard for if you want bhakti is greed. And no matter how much sukriti you have on the background, pious credits and Vaidhi Bhakti, that won't get you to Braj Bhakti. It will get you to good association, and that will get you to Braj Bhakti. So if one has sufficient sukriti, nothing can stop him from getting that kind of association, which will give him the highest blessings in Krishna consciousness. And if one doesn't have sufficient sukriti, and he's not ready for that, then anything can get in his way. So, in fact, there's a verse, what is that verse? Bhaktistu bhagavata bhakti sangena parijayate satsanga labhyate punbir sukritai purva sanskritai. After many, many millions of births of sukritis, spiritual pious merits, one gets the association of a pure devotee. And by his association or their association, one becomes a bhakta himself. So I particularly don't see anyone or anything or any institution at fault for what's going on. I see it as, according to a person's qualification, he'll surround himself, or Krishna will surround him, or Maya will surround him, whatever, with that particular type of influence, that he'll stay where he is, or he'll go where he's supposed to go. And so many devotees came from ISKCON and still consider themselves in ISKCON, just like I do, and came to Srila Narayana Maharaj and other acharyas despite all bad propaganda, and others didn't. And those who are giving bad propaganda is because they also have threats to them. So they also have to make choices. And everyone's choices are based on sukritis or sanskars. So I personally don't take it as caused by anyone or any institution. It's the particular individual's inclination and readiness or not readiness. Here's a perfect example. In the Krishna book, you'll see that there are gopis who had the association of the Nityasiddha gopis, sufficient association. And when Krishna played his flute, they all left their husbands, and they, in the middle of taking care of their kids, in the middle of baking, they went to join the rasa dance. But those who did not have sufficient eagerness, they were able to be held back by their husbands, but they became so much in deep separation that deep separation burnt their present attachment. And so the next night or the night after that, they would be able to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. That's a great way to look at it. That it's not a certain institution, but it's the you could say the understanding wasn't there yet. So it's
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's hard to think like that. It's hard to think like that because you just want to blame someone or an institution
For anything.
for anything. Yeah.
We always have our go-to blames.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then what happens? We learned from Prabhupada, we learned from Srila Narayana Maharaj that there's a tar baby issue with blaming and criticizing, which is that you get the faults that you're criticizing, whether or not the person has it doesn't make any difference.
Right.
It's like it's building a bridge of consciousness. And so, the story, I think, I heard the story when I first joined, actually, that there was a brahmana and, or was it two brahmanas? And there was a prostitute. And the brahmana was criticizing the prostitute. So, and she was always very humble and respectful to him. And she was always thinking, I wish I could have those good qualities. And he was always thinking, look at all these guys going to her place and how low they are. And I'm a great brahmana, and Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So at the end, the Yamadutas came for the brahmana and the Vishnu Dutas came for the prostitute.
Wow.
So why? Because they were thinking of each other's qualities.
Wow.
So, more and more I'm learning how dangerous it is to criticize.
I mean, it's just a testament of your amazing qualities of humility and tolerance, that after being in ISKCON for your whole life, practically, then you have to hear this like criticism of someone who you really felt was like on par with Srila Prabhupada,
and
and
help.
who
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, it pains my heart really to hear all that. And I mean, I grew up during that time in 1995. I remember there was times where there was so much criticizing going on, and I was young, but I wasn't that young, but I still remember some of it. And now that now that I'm older, I'm beginning to understand, with even what you said. That's bringing a lot of light to that, and I appreciate that. um I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of women in a spiritual society,
Hmm.
because you have been in ISKCON for so many 54 years, and you have so many experiences that you can share. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the role of women in a spiritual society, and then we can, I have a few more questions on the same lines.
Okay, that's a nice question too. All of your questions are fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
Um, so I can tell you what Prabhupada said about the role of women. He wrote a letter to my god sister and said that the roles of all conditioned souls are the same. Chant Hare Krishna, encourage others to chant, practice, read, go back to home, back to Godhead. He said that's man, woman, rich, poor, anyone. Everyone has the same role. And that's how I was brought up with Srila Prabhupada. In 1968, some of the young men were trying to get me to stop giving classes, because we all started giving classes at so young, because Prabhupada was with us in New York, and then he went to open the second ISKCON temple in San Francisco. And so we immediately started taking turns. But then a year later, some devotees wrote to Prabhupada that I shouldn't be giving classes because I'm a woman. So
Mm,
Prabhupada said to him that he quoted that verse, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi Subra Kaninai.
yeah.
Anyone who knows the science of Krishna, he can become a guru, a teacher. He said, so we don't make any distinctions between male and female. In 1975, some of the sannyasis wanted me not to give classes. And so Prabhupada said, your position of sannyasi, that's a material consideration, but preacher is transcendental, has nothing to do.
Wow.
And he wrote so many encouraging letters to his girl disciples, like Govinda Dasi. She did amazing preaching and converting thousands of people and their gurus to come and take shelter of Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada wrote her a letter that I want to put your story in Back to Godhead with photos, and I'm naming the story Heroine Govinda Dasi.
Wow.
And there
Amazing.
are so many other examples.
Right, right. Along the same lines of Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi, do you believe that women can become Diksha gurus?
So believe or not believe, they are
Right.
for hundreds of years. In 1970 or 69, I asked Srila Prabhupada, can girls preach? And so he said, why not? Janava, who is the consort of Nityananda Prabhu, when he left the world, she became the leader of all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and she would chastise all the unscrupulous Vaishnavas. Thousands of them, Narottam, Jiva Goswami, they all took her shelter. And even her co-wife was Vasudha. And Vasudha's son is Bir Bhadra or Bir Chandra. And he wanted to get initiation, so somebody recommended to him that he get initiation from Janava. So he said, I'm not getting initiated by a woman, especially like my mother. So then one day he was going to the well and he saw her from a great distance. And in those days, the ladies would bathe in the well, so she was uncovered from her waist up. So they saw each other from a very far distance and they both got embarrassed. So 2 extra arms manifested from her and she covered her breasts. So he realized she's not an ordinary woman.
Wow.
So he immediately, this is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as well, he immediately surrendered to her and accepted her as his Diksha disciple. And so many big acharyas were her Shiksha disciples. And then there's so many examples, but just prominent among them, Ganga Mata Goswamini. She used to be Sati, and she was a princess. And she wasn't at all interested in being a princess or getting married. And so she told her parents that. And she was especially upset when her father was arranging her marriage. So seeing how sincere she was, he sent her with a conveyance to Vrindavan. And then she was looking, who can be my guru? And she found someone, Haridas, who was in the line of Srila Rupa Goswami. And she got trained under him. She lived a very austere life doing bhiksha. And then he sent her to Puri 25 years later. And he said, I want you to establish the place of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, where he and Mahaprabhu would have their conversations. So she went there and she was giving classes on Gopi Geet, Venu Geet, the Ras Panchajai of 10th canto, and the whole of Puri would come to her. And then one day it became the appearance day of Ganga, the river Ganga. So everyone was taking bath in Ganga, but she was so far away. And she was lamenting that she couldn't go because she was taking care of her deity, Syamarani. And that also was a magical way how he came to her. So then she fell asleep, and the Ganga carried her from where she was. It grabbed her and carried her to the Ganga, and then brought her to the temple of Puri. Inside the temple, inside right where Lord Jagannath was. So then the pujaris came in at the time of Mangal Arti, and they said, oh, so she's not only a preacher, she's a thief as well. So they threw her in jail, and then the Jagannath appeared to the king, and he said, you don't understand, she's my great devotee. If you don't take shelter of her, initiation from her with all of your kingdom, dynasty, ministers, then I'm going to destroy your kingdom. So they all did. So there are many examples of Hemlata Thakurani, Krishna Priya in the time of Viswanath Chakrabarti Thakur, of lady gurus. So it's not a matter of believe they should or shouldn't. And we already have Srila Prabhupada's words that the qualification for men and women are the same. One who fully knows the science of Krishna, who's liberated, because the bound cannot, in the Bhagavad Gita, the bound cannot untie the bound.
Right. I think what I to elaborate more on that is that the institution of ISKCON has a guru system, you could say, where they approve guruship. So the question there comes, can women be approved as gurus? And I know that the philosophy is that there's no such thing as an approval system. It's that if one who who knows Krishna, the tattva, they can be guru. So
and who's realized.
Right. I guess that's not a question, it's more of a comment. Building more upon the previous the question before that, I mean, I want to say that it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam and different purports of Srila Prabhupada that a woman in her youth should be protected by her father, in her married life by her husband, and when she gets older by her sons. So are there exceptions to this rule? Because I see you are like living like a sadhu life, like a sannyasi life. And there are many other women who live like that. So maybe you could give a little bit of your reflection on that a woman always needs to be protected, yet there are examples in our modern time of women who are more in that sannyasi type role.
Well, even though I'm in a sannyasi type role, I feel fully protected by Srila Prabhupada, Srila Narayana Maharaj, our others acharyas, by all their books, by God brothers and God sisters. I'm always surrounded by devotees.
Right.
I don't mean I'm surrounded. I mean, I'm always in the association.
Right.
Devotees. So I feel fully protected. If you don't mind, I would like to read some
Please,
things
please.
from Srila Prabhupada about girls' independence or dependence, and who's dependent and who's independent. In the Vedic culture, it was natural that people were very advanced. And so the husband and the father and the sons could actually offer protection, not only physical protection, but also spiritual protection. Now we're in Kali Yuga, Kalo Sudra Sambhava, everyone is Sudra. And then one becomes Brahmin by proper initiation. So Prabhupada writes this. It was very eye-opening. Unmarried girls worship Lord Shiva so that they can expect a husband who is as good a Vaishnava as he. The girls are not taught to select a husband who is very rich or opulent for sense gratification. If a girl is fortunate enough to get a husband as good as Lord Shiva, then her life is perfect. Devahuti, the mother of Kapila Dev, said, I have taken shelter of your lotus feet. You are the only person of whom I can take shelter. Now, when does a husband not deserve to be called the protector of the wife, or a son or a father? As far as Sati, the daughter of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, was concerned, she was advised to give up her relationship with her husband. Srimad Bhagavatam states, Daivim nasasyan napatis tasasyan namochayed yet samupeta mrityum. One cannot be a husband if he cannot liberate his parents, his descendants, from inevitable death. If a person is not in Krishna consciousness and is bereft of spiritual power, he cannot protect his wife from the path of repeated birth and death. Consequently, such a person cannot be accepted as a husband. A wife should dedicate her life and everything to Krishna for further advancement. If her husband abandons Krishna consciousness and she gives up her connection with him, she follows in the footsteps of the Dvija Patnis, the wives of the Brahmanas who were engaged in performing sacrifices. Then Prabhupada quotes so many prayers to Lord Krishna from chapter 29 would be the gopis. If a woman accepts you as the supreme husband, she will never be bereft of her husband, as in the bodily concept of life. If we accept you as our ultimate husband, then there is no question of being separated, divorced, widowed. So there's those prayers. Under the circumstances, what woman who has heard of your glories from authoritative sources would be foolish to marry someone of this material world who's afraid of death, disease, old age, and rebirth? Then Prabhupada also has a couple of quotes about independence. Whose independence? Is man independent and a woman dependent? So Prabhupada writes, as the earth, water, fire, sky, they are also controlled. The supreme controller is Krishna. Similarly, the so-called man or woman in this material world, they are also controlled. Nobody can say, I am not controlled. Who is here? You must be controlled. Another, he's talking about real independence. The living entity is situated between two energies of the Lord, and because he belongs to the superior energy, he has a particle of independence. By proper use of that independence, he comes under the direct order of Krishna. Thus he returns to his normal condition in the pleasure-giving potency. Real independence means complete faith in the mercy of the Lord without dependence on the conditions of matter. Actually, a conditioned soul is forced to act under the pressure of the modes of material nature. No living entity has independence. Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to my god sister Shilavati. he said that she was starting some programs for women in Los Angeles. And so he wrote to her that I'm so happy that you're doing this. Oh, you don't know the page? No, it's not there.
Tell me which year.
No, I don't know if it's it's either in 70, it's in my memoir book, either in 76 or 90. I'm not exactly sure, but I think I have it here. Let's see. He wrote to her that generally in the Vedic culture, the woman there it is. Here. Actually, because she was asking about the role of women.
Mhm.
And here's when he said the role of all conditioned souls is the same. And I'm so happy that you're teaching the girls in Los Angeles about the role they play in Krishna consciousness. Now, if you can induce all the women in Los Angeles to place an altar in their homes and help their husbands have peaceful, happy home life in Krishna consciousness, that will be a great service for you. The actual system is that the husband is the spiritual master of his wife. But if the wife can bring her husband into practicing this process, then it is all right for the husband to accept the wife as the spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that anyone who knows the science of Krishna, he is the spiritual master. Regardless of any material, so-called qualifications, rich, poor, man, woman, Brahmana, or Sudra. So at different times, Prabhupada says different things for different occasions.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. There's a question on that.
And speaking of women can't have independence, but men can.
Yes.
So in one of these quotes, Prabhupada says that dependence or to not have independence doesn't mean to not have independence to act. It means protection from the exploitation of men. Just like one nation is under the protection of another nation, but that nation does their own thing.
Wonderful example. Wow, that's brilliant. There's a question in the comment section that I'm posting on the screen at the moment right here. Vic Sharma is asking, Srila Prabhupada's biographies say that he struggled alone to set up ISKCON and no one helped him. How does Mataji view this? Does this contribute to the divide? If you could comment on that.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. And it's an understandable question. These kind of statements definitely contribute to the divide. Whether or not these statements are true is another thing. In my memoir, I talk about a discussion in 1977, just a few days before Prabhupada's departure, when he calls in Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj, and they have a conversation in Bengali, which was translated into English. So there, Prabhupada says, please ask my godbrothers to forgive me for my offenses, because I wanted to increase the enthusiasm of my neophyte disciples. I had to say so many things that, yes, you're the only ones who are helping me, and you're the only ones who are doing anything in the world. So please ask them to forgive me. And so Srila Narayana Maharaj answered him, there's no need for forgiveness. All acharyas have to do things like that to increase the enthusiasm. So actually, there's one of the books called Letters from America, which has only 12 of the 300 letters that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Srila Narayana Maharaj back in the 60s and 70s, when he was asking him, please send these books, please send my Sanskrit books, please send kartals, please send these deities. And Srila Narayana Maharaj was sending all that. Mridanga, first two Mridangas came from Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj. So,
wow.
And his godbrothers, only now I'm hearing about it, because I was also brought up in the same way.
Right.
That we're the only. So his godbrothers were so much not only God brothers, but their disciples were so much glorifying and praising Prabhupada for opening up the West.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, as they, I have a degree in history, and the thing that they mentioned to me was history is biased.
Yeah.
History is biased. So I think something that I want to talk about now is your name as Syamarani, Devi
Very
Dasi. So a lot of people have a misconception that you were reinitiated by Srila Narayana Maharaj. Could you please comment on that?
If I imagined in my wildest imagination that that's what was happening, I wouldn't have visited him after the first time. So what is happening is he's just giving nicknames. What he explained to me after I finished the Seva Kunj painting, you all know that one.
Yes, yes.
Which is a painting of Radha Shyamasundar. He said, at first, your Prabhupada gave you the name Jadurani because he wanted you to understand Krishna's godhood as Jadunath, Jadubar of the Jadu Bangsi. Sometimes Krishna was seen with 4 arms, sometimes the universal form, sometimes 2 arms. He expanded into 16,000 palaces. So Prabhupada wanted you to understand, and Prabhupada also said, if you try to enter into Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes without knowing that he's God, you'll commit offenses. What a naughty rascal, stealing butter and things. So he said now he wants you to understand more your relationship with Krishna as a Brajabasi. And so he inspired me to give you the name Syamarani. Shama means Shama means Radharani, the feminine counterpart of Sham.
Right.
And Rani means queen, Krishna's queen. He said, because your Prabhupada wants you to come more towards that ultimate goal of life. So
Wonderful.
that also inspired me to accept the name, because he told me that it was, because I believe that personalities who are on the same level can easily talk to each other on that level. It's not that, oh, he left this world, I can't talk to him anymore.
Right.
Even a disciple like Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he took sannyas from a picture of Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj.
Right.
And he could do that because of the level that they were both on, or are both on.
Please continue.
No.
I think something that that is not so widely understood is Srila Prabhupada and Srila Narayana Maharaj's relationship before Srila Prabhupada even came to America. Could you sort of explain their relationship?
Sure, I'd love to. Just going back to, I have not given up the name Jadurani.
Okay.
I still use the name Jadurani in the that book that you just held up.
Yes.
Mine. You can see it right on the cover. It has both names. In fact, it has Jadurani first.
Right.
Syamarani in parentheses.
Correct, yes.
And this new art book that I'm going to hopefully be publishing in the next few months, with all of the paintings I did for Prabhupada and Srila Narayana Maharaj, also the both names are there. So some people prefer one name, some people prefer another. And so I go with the flow of that.
Right.
So regarding your new question, which I already forgot because I'm
Oh gosh, I forgot it too. What was that question?
Something related.
Yeah, it was related. The relationship between Srila Narayana Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you. So it started, their relationship started in the early 40s when his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj, was giving a class, and Prabhupada at that time was a householder, and there was like thousands of people there. And Prabhupada came in from the back, and because Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj was in the front, he could see the back. And so he called Prabhupada over all the way to the front to sit up with him on the stage. And then he told Srila Narayana Maharaj afterwards, I want you to take his association. So right from before the birth of ISKCON, before my birth, a year before my birth, in 1946, they were associating, and Prabhupada would visit their mutt. And he said Prabhupada always treated me with so much love, and he wrote me letters that the same love that my Guru Maharaj had for me, meaning Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I have that same transcendental love for you. So our relationship is eternal. And so then and Prabhupada was assisting with the affairs of the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti. And then Srila Narayana Maharaj said to Srila Prabhupada in 1959, because that's when Prabhupada's wife kicked him out of the house, and the tea or me thing.
Right.
And so then Prabhupada took Varnaprastha, and he was living in Vrindavan. And so Srila Narayana Maharaj said to him, so what are you doing? You did not come to this world to sell medicine. He was Day's Ayurvedic medicine.
Right.
You came for a special mission. He said, my Guru Maharaj, he's coming in a few days to Mathura, so why don't you take sannyas from him? And when I heard him say this, it reminded me of, not that Prabhupada had to be told that this isn't what you came to the world for, but just like right after Krishna killed the Keshi demon, Narada came to him and said, so you're enjoying here in Vrindavan while your parents, Vasudeva and Devaki, are being kicked by the boots of Kamsa, and the whole of the Yadu dynasty is in fear, and they've headed for the caves. You have so many responsibilities, and you're just enjoying here? You have all these marriages to do. So then Krishna said, oh, yes, thank you. And then he thought of a way to leave Vrindavan. So it's similarly what's called a Naravata Leela pastime, means human-like pastime between them.
Right.
So then a few days later, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj came and said, yes, please take sannyas. So Prabhupada took sannyas. You can see that picture, that picture of Prabhupada standing on one side and Muni Maharaj standing on another side, and Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav. Can you find that there? I think it's 68. Sitting in the middle. So that's the day that he took sannyas. And so Prabhupada had continued his intimate relationship with Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj and got the Gopi mantra from him, and continued his relationship with Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj. And when he first came to America, he invited Srila Narayana Maharaj to come and help him preach. But Srila Narayana Maharaj said, I can't come right now because I have these responsibilities for my Guru Maharaj in the centers here in India. But then he said, it took Prabhupada from 1921, when he first met Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said, you're qualified, you're intelligent, go preach in the West in the English language. He said it took Prabhupada 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 40 years to follow that instructions. And it only took me 30 years to follow his instruction to come to America.
Wow.
He said, so I'm coming because I want to go to the holy places where his footsteps were and take the dust from his head. And I want to, he planted so many seeds of pure bhakti, and he told me to water them with Hari Katha. So the second reason that I came is to, so many seeds had dried up, like especially me, so many seeds that he planted had dried up, or they had become sprouts and they were dried. So he told me to waterize those seeds and sprouts so they can become nourished in bhakti. And he told me the third instruction that he gave me was to continue his mission.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's
They're
gives a
just
little
very
idea.
intimately related, and I
Very
don't think
intimate.
many people know that. There's a question in the comment section here by Ananta Sri Das. He asks, "How do you view reinitiation? I have several godbrothers who have taken reinitiation from Srila Narayan Swami, getting new names, etc., even though on their own spiritual master is in good standing. According to my understanding, this is not accepted by our philosophy. Could you please give your view on that?"
Surely, thank you, Anantashri Das Prabhu. A few things. One, when in 1996, it was Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj's first world tour. And so he was initiating a few Westerners. And so he was asked the same question. And he said, I only initiate when the disciple had completely already lost faith in their guru, good standing, not in good standing by somebody's standards or somebody else's not standards, and they've lost their faith and they are losing their faith in bhakti. To reignite their bhakti, because they have faith in me, I'll therefore initiate them. There's already so many reinitiations in ISKCON. Some devotees have had 3 failures in ISKCON.
Right.
So if it's against our philosophy, then it's against our philosophy, whatever's happening in ISKCON as well. It states in the Nectar of Devotion, depending on the edition of Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada writes that if somebody is acting as acharya, but he doesn't have the qualifications of acharya, but he has personal interests, then his is not a very high standard of bhakti. So one should then accept initiation from a bona fide guru. So the person may or may not be in good standard. I'm not qualified to say. But if a disciple thinks that for this reason or that reason, or perhaps because my guru is banning pure devotees and he's blaspheming pure devotees, then Srila Jiva Goswami also says immediately reject that guru and take a bona fide initiation. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah,
But
I
he
mean, I think that
never,
answers the question.
yeah, because he never attempts. In fact, before the ban in 1995, Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj was always encouraging devotees he said, I'll always help you, but follow the instructions of your guru, follow ISKCON, serve ISKCON. But when he was forced, because they said, you're not allowed to go see him, or you go to hell, we reject you, Prabhupada rejects you, then he said, I was forced to jump over the ocean like a lion and give initiation.
Wow. Wow. To save devotees' bhakti,
Yeah,
essentially.
otherwise they would just leave.
Right, right. I'd like to ask you a question. I think so. We're at 1 hour and 43 minutes. It's been so wonderful. I am so thankful to you again. But I'd like to ask you if you could go back in time and give your teenage self 2 pieces of advice. What would they be?
How old am I? Because when I was a 19-year-old teenager, I gave myself the piece of advice to go to the temple.
Right. Okay.
Before that?
No, I would say like from 19 till now you've got so many different realizations about life and about things like that. So from what you are now till when you first started devotional life, maybe a little bit older even than 19, what kind of advice would you give yourself? Like what kind of lessons or advice essentially?
I think I would tell myself that what I'm learning now is not to read, but to pray to the book. Oh Prabhu, you're not a book. You are, let's say it's first canto. You are Srila Prabhupada yourself. You're Srila Sukadeva Goswami yourself. You're Maharaj Pariksit yourself. You're Vyasadeva yourself. you're Viswanath Chakrabarti yourself and all the other personalities in the book. I'm sitting here at your lotus feet as you're personally speaking to me. So please, all of you, shower your mercy on me so that I can realize what you're saying as I'm sitting at your lotus feet. So I
Wow.
would tell my younger self to read with more seriousness and prayer. I would also tell myself to, by that reading and by that hearing, I would tell myself that there is some things to think about while chanting, not just trying to hear, because in a stage of just trying to hear, when the mind is thriving for varieties of sense enjoyment, to utter devotional prayers like the prayers that we learn in the Mangalacharana section of the songbook, like what is one prayer?
Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam.
Swapitam Yena Bhutale, praying to Rupa Goswami, but for what? For service to Radha and Krishna. Or what's another one? What's one's to Radha and Krishna? Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. That thinking of the deep meanings of those prayers and uttering the prayers at the same time as chanting Hare Krishna. Otherwise, the mind goes to other varieties and other prayers. I wish I had a this, and why did I have to get a that?
Wow.
So those are two.
Brilliant.
I would say don't be alone in the room with a man. Unless he's your husband or your brother.
Right. I have a question from the comment section from Janava Mata Dasi. Is it true that Srila Prabhupada continues to guide us internally to the highest levels of bhakti?
Most definitely. That is most definitely. The thing is, can we hear him? Number one. Number two, how do we know if it's him or if it's my mind? Because back in 1967, when I was painting in Prabhupada's quarters, and we had this big jug, really tall jug of glubjamins that Prabhupada would feed us. So then Kirtananda Swami asked him, can we hear you in our heart? And Prabhupada said, when you become pure, you can hear me in your heart. So yes, he's certainly wanting to, doing, guiding, but can I hear the real him? Or I so many times in my life, after Prabhupada's departure, I made the wrong decision thinking that it was him who was telling me something. And that's why I accepted a Shiksha Guru, who I'm convinced is on the same level as Prabhupada, but more than that, who's associating with Prabhupada and who knows exactly what Prabhupada would tell me at a particular time, so that I know I'm getting it from Prabhupada. Actually, Satsvarup Maharaj in 1991 asked Srila Narayana Maharaj, now that Srila Prabhupada's left, I'm asking different God brothers like who to pray to. And so I'm asking them different questions, how to understand this or that, and they're giving different answers. And so I decided I'm just going to forget all that and just pray to the super soul in my heart. Do you recommend that I pray to the super soul? And Srila Narayana Maharaj said, why the super soul? Certainly he's in your heart, but why not pray to your Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada? He's right there. He said, I still pray to my Gurudev and I get so much guidance from him. So also Guru, being one, is called Akhanda Guru Tattva, means the undivided, complete principle of Guru. That's Nityananda Prabhu Baladev. And all Gurus are manifestations of that Akhanda Guru Tattva Nityananda Baladev. So if one guru is telling me something that I'm fully convinced is knowing what Prabhupada wants at that moment, then I know that I'm hearing from Prabhupada.
Wonderful.
In fact, I was crying to Prabhupada when I first met Srila Narayana Maharaj in 1992, and I was on a rickshaw going back to the Krishna Balaram Mandir where I was staying, and I was literally crying, oblivious to anybody who was there, crying out loud, "Oh, Prabhupada, if this is the wrong thing or the right thing that I'm seeing, Srila Narayana Maharaj, please tell me clearly." And then I saw him across the street, just jumping on a bus. And then me and my god sister jumped on the bus as it was leaving, as it was moving. And then, so I sat on the floor next to his seat, Srila Reinmar's seat, and I said, "So how do I know that Srila Prabhupada really wants me to be hearing from you and staying, living here in Vrindavan and hearing from you?" He said, "I have got no material desires," meaning it told me so many things that because of that, I'm getting direct information from him how to help you.
Wonderful. Another question. There's a few questions coming in. This is from Natasha Nitai Leela Puhar. Srila Prabhupada said that your love for me will be shown by how well you cooperate with each other after I leave. He also said that if there are problems, to work together to resolve them, but not to leave. If Srila Prabhupada is present in his books and instructions, then how can leaving his movement be justified for a sincere disciple? Thank you. I think you answered that in your previous what you were
And
saying.
neither did I ever leave, but I was excommunicated. And a lot of times, sincere devotees would ask me to give classes, and I'd say sure, in different cities. And then somehow or other, their GBC would find out about it and cut it. The only temple that it wasn't cut was, where was I? New Orleans.
Oh.
And I gave a long class about my remembrances of Prabhupada in New Orleans. I thank them for that.
Wonderful. Another question. Madhu Brata Das says, Hare Krishna Syamarani Didi Dandavat Pranams. Could you please explain the importance of a Shiksha Guru? If we need to take him in a specific stage of the process of bhakti and how we can properly identify him. Thanks, Namras Prabhu, for this interview. Really nice.
Okay, good question from Madhu Brat Prabhu. How do we know when to accept a Shiksha Guru? And how do we identify him?
Right, the importance of the Shiksha Guru and if we need to take him in a specific stage of bhakti. And how can you identify? Yes.
Everyone's already taking Shiksha Gurus from somebody.
Right.
Everybody has a mentor and listens to his mentor or mentors or chooses, I'll choose this mentor now for this, and I'll choose this mentor to listen to for that. Then it depends on how strict we want to be in our definition of Shiksha Guru. It's stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in Srila Prabhupada's translation that the Shiksha Guru is the manifestation of Krishna's Swarup, or nature, and the Diksha Guru is the manifestation of Krishna's form. So there's no difference between his internal, external form and nature. So the Shiksha Guru, if in the strictest sense of the term, is either on an equal level with the Diksha Guru, or the Shiksha Guru may be more than the Diksha Guru. For example, Srila Prabhupada is my Diksha Guru, and Srila Rupa Goswami is my Shiksha Guru because I read his books. So Prabhupada worships Rupa Goswami. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is my Shiksha Guru. He's, of course, superior to Srila Prabhupada. So the Shiksha Guru may be just anybody, if that's who I'm choosing, in the not strict sense of the term. But if Krishna arranges, because it's Krishna's arrangement, who gets who as any kind of guru.
Yeah.
If someone gets a cheating guru, if someone gets a bona fide guru, if someone can follow his bona fide guru, all of that is arranged by Krishna according to our sincerity, our sakritis, our sanskars.
Yeah.
If I'm sincerely desiring pure bhakti and connection with Guru, and I'm ready for a bona fide Shiksha Guru, then Krishna will arrange that.
Right.
Or he may send one, but if I'm still not ready, I won't be able to follow him. This is called Praktan Sanskars in Jaiva Dharma. Depending on my many, many, many last lives' impressions, it'll be hard or easy to get a guru, then it'll be hard or easy to follow one.
Hmm.
Did that answer the question, Madhuvrat Prabhu?
I think it did. It's going to be a little bit of lag for when he answers, but
I see.
yeah. So I'd like to ask about you spoke about how when you read you have to think of it as please you have to talk give a prayer to the book that please help me serve you and understand and like that, and then for chanting not just hearing the mantra but also praying these like that you give the example of the Mangalacharana and having those prayers in your mind while you're chanting. Is there any other tips, because these are very practical tips that I really love? Are there any other practical tips you can give for becoming deeper in our spiritual life?
Having good association, desiring good association.
What do
Prahlad
you mean by
Maharaj,
good association?
Prahlad Maharaj prayed, please let me always have the association of your pure devotees. Somehow or other, if it's not possible physically, by internet, if it's not possible by in that way, by reading the books in that way, we treat the books as our Shiksha Gurus. You want to know a practical thing about Mahaprashadam?
Sure.
That's practical.
Yes.
And there are thousands of prayers we can say for chanting, even all the Acharya's songs. Kabhi habe bola se dinama. When will that day come? When all my offenses in chanting stop and taste for the holy name increasing. I can think of all those songs, not while I'm chanting, but sing them and then chant, look at them and then chant.
Hmm.
And then after a while, you can look at another one and then chant. So for prasadam, not to eat Krishna prasadam and not to take Krishna prasadam, but to serve Krishna prasadam and honor Krishna prasadam. I held a class today and I asked the devotees, they were from all walks of life. I said, who doesn't know this prayer, Mahaprashadi Govinde, what is it? Surya
Namavam.
Vijayal. And
Right.
most everybody raised their hand that they didn't know it.
Hmm.
See, when I first joined ISKCON, it was like one of the first things you learn.
Right.
But now, especially with, there's not so many temples, devotees have their own houses and somehow or other
Hmm.
associate here and there. So it hadn't become such a popular thing. But in anything we're doing, to pay full attention and think of the deepest meaning. Like Mahaprashade Govinde. O Mahaprasad, you are none different from Govinda, from Radha and Govinda. You are none different from the holy name. The holy name is so powerful that just like Krishna, the holy name can create innumerable universes in a second and destroy them in a second and recreate them in a second. And the pure Vaishnavas, like Viswanath Chakrabarti Thakur, O Nam, O Mahaprasad, Mahaprasade Govinde, Nam Brahmani, and the pure Brahmins, Vaishnavi. Then, because you're non-different from them, therefore you can take away everything that they can take away, which is all my anarthas, my offenses, and you can give me everything that they can give me, which is pure prem and even the love of the gopis. So please give me all this. And then knowing that the Pushtaram is non-different from Krishna's pastimes as well. And there are so many Pushtaram pastimes.
Right.
Even in the Pushtaram song, Bhaja Baka Tabatsala Sri Gaura Hari, paying attention and praying to go into the deep meanings and have association with those who'll take me to the deep meanings.
Wow.
Very important practical. Trinadapi Sunichena Tarodapi Sahishnana Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadaharihi. It used to be when Prabhupada was giving lectures, and he would say, don't offend Vaishnavas. And then I would think, as a young devotee, yes, don't offend me. No one should offend me. So how many years of chanting later, I realized I shouldn't offend Vaishnavas.
Mm.
And if somebody is critical of me or disrespectful to me, then I want to see through the eye of scriptures and not through my peacock feather eyes, how to return that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, give them respect even though they don't respect me. Okay, so what are some examples of that? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an example of that. When his guru's godbrother, no, his guru's godbrother was criticizing him that he ate too much.
Mm.
He just ate less and he didn't retaliate or criticize.
Right.
There's a very nice, okay. Hari Priya wants me to answer short so we could go on to the next question.
Oh, okay. Oh, speaking of Hari Priya, she
Hari
has a
Priya.
question. If you could tell us in one sentence what Srila Prabhupada and our Guru Varga came to give, what would that be?
Certainly, I can tell you in 4 lines. Srila Prabhupada explains in many places, and I say many because I checked folio, of his books and lectures, Anarpita Chiring Charat Karunayavatir Nam Kalo Samarpayitam Anatojvalarasam Swabhakti Sriyam Hari Purita Sundaram Dutitukadam Basandi Pita Sada Hridaya Kundare Spurituva Sachinandana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give what no other acharya or incarnation ever gained before in a long time. What's the long time? Since Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in the previous day of Brahma. And what is that? He came to taste the love. Krishna came to taste the love of Srimati Radhika and Swabhakti Sriyam. He came to give the service of the maidservants of Srimati Radhika. So that's what our Srila Prabhupada came to give. That's what all of our acharyas came to give. That's what Srila Narayana Maharaj came to give. The same message. Sometimes their words are different. Like Prabhupada says, don't drink dirty water. And I say, drink clean water. So much difference. It's the same thing, just said in different words.
Right. Right. Thank you. So I'd like to wrap it up now with so right now in this COVID-19, devotees are very isolated, and there's a lack of associating with devotees in person. So what would you say to devotees how they can continue their spiritual lives and feel inspired and feel enthused?
Well, I would say 2 things. I mean, of all the controversial questions you've asked, I think this is the most controversial.
Oh, really?
Because half the devotees believe in a pandemic, and half the devotees believe that it's a scamdemic
Right.
or a plandemic. And it's not really what it appeared to be. We hear from the internet that doctors are being paid to say this person died from COVID, where they really didn't. So I'm a little bit more inclined in that direction. So I have a lot of association with devotees in a physical way.
Right.
And but for those who, I also don't criticize devotees who believe another way about it.
Right.
And so I actually feel as much when I'm communicating with devotees by internet as I do in person. Just like now I'm talking to you, and I don't see any differences if we were in the same room together.
Right.
And we're how many miles away? Where are you? New
I'm
York.
in New Jersey. Yeah, New York. Yeah.
Jersey.
Yeah.
So that's hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
Yes.
I don't feel any separation. So I would suggest then, if they don't have that, and if they're too scared, then get as much association as they comfortably can by the internet. Kirtans, classes, there are thousands of them now online. learning slokas.
Right. Okay, there's one more question on the comments, and then we'll go into bhaktiart.net. We want to show some your painting. But before that, there's a question from Revati Dasi. Dear Mataji, can you please dispel my doubts about why Srila Narayana Maharaj spoke about very high, intimate topics about Radha and Krishna, while our Guru Varga were often very cautious about it?
I absolutely love the question, and I was hoping somebody would ask that.
Great.
Okay, so every day, Srila Narayana Maharaj's audio seva team sends out lectures. And the very lecture that I was hearing today was Kapila Devahuti. It's just like he was reading from the Bhagavatam, because I had to read Prabhupada's books very carefully. I mean, I'm a lazy good for nothing and all that, but because I had to pick out pictures, I had to read very, very carefully to get whatever details I could. So hearing them this morning from Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj, it was just like he was reading Prabhupada's translation of the Bhagavatam. Devahuti Kapila, how Kardama Muni, the whole story of Kardama Muni, and how Brahma gave Kardama Muni to Devahuti, and then how she observed so much austerities, and then he left when Kapila was about 16, and then she inquired from him, and that whole thing, basic. Then the next thing he talked about was Paranjana Upaksha, the character of Paranjana, the allegorical story of Paranjana, who's actually the soul in the body, and he meets his wife, who's actually his intelligence. Every detail, how he became a woman in his next life and married King Malayadwaja, everything. And then the other thing was Bharat Maharaj, how he became a deer. And then in the Kapila Devahuti, talking about how when his soul dies, he takes birth in a certain womb. And at the beginning, it's a little chickpea seed, and then it grows little hands and legs, and depending on whether it comes from an egg, all that basic stuff. Ambarish Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj. I don't know one city. I've been with him for 14 tours in 30 cities. 14 tours means summer, winter, in like 50 cities. I don't know in what city he didn't tell the whole story of Prahlad Maharaj. So
Wow.
yes, he does talk intimate things, and he talks basic things, and he talks in between things. So if we have, how many volumes of Prabhupada's books? 70 volumes of books. Many are basic, many are medium, and many are high. But we do find that Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj's books and lectures talk about extra things. Number one, I would like to say that many of his lectures, which are now all over the world, were given behind doors to the GBC. Vallabh Kusmanjali, Gopi Geet, Brahma Samhita, Bhagavat Chandrika, they were all given behind doors. But you know how devotees are. Let's spread it. And also, when I was coming to him before his Western touring from 1992 to 1996, when he started his first world touring, this was also just to a few people when he was talking about how to enter into Raganuga Bhakti. He said Raganuga Bhakti cannot be preached widely. Vaidhi Bhakti is preached widely by any of our acharyas. When he came to the West, he talked just a little bit about it. And why? Because it's in Prabhupada's books. You find in Sanatan Shiksha, there's so many verses about Vaidhi Bhakti. Then there are verses about Raganuga Bhakti. Then there are verses about Ragatmika Bhakti. What is the definition of Raganuga Bhakti? What is the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti? What is the definition of Bhav Bhakti? What is the definition of Sadhana Bhakti? And so similarly, Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj would speak about all these things that are in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Plus, if we're not aware of the goal, we cannot have a process to attain it. Just like Haripriya Agarwal, who just asked that question. She's here with me right now. She came from Sugar Land all the way to Austin, where I am. It's a 2-hour drive. So if she didn't know my exact address, then the GPS wouldn't have been able to tell her how to get here. Even she wouldn't have known whether to turn right or left when she left her house. So when we get general, I'm a general das, that's all very, very good at that stage. But unless I know what particular kind of das I am and what particular relationship I am, and what is the goal of all those, or 99% of those who are coming in Rupa Goswami's line and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya, in the line of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in the line of Srila Saraswati Thakur, then I can't gradually get there. And I can stay on my same level for millions of lives if I don't know where I'm going. So there has to be some sense of some pastimes of that. And he doesn't tell any naked pastimes of Radha and Krishna.
Right. Thank you so much. So we've gone to 2 hours and 10 minutes. This has been so amazing. I'd like to just plug a few things. This amazing book, if you'd like to buy it, it's the artofspirituallife.com. I will put the link in the comment section. This is a wonderful book by Syamarani Mataji about her times with Srila Prabhupada, coming all the way to the present day. It's just a wonderful, beautiful book to read. You can't put it down, actually. It's just so interesting. And another thing is her paintings. So there is bhaktiart.net. So I believe that Haripriya wants to show some art now. Is that right?
I guess so.
Great.
Yes. You want me to hold it? You want to get the posters?
Wonderful. Okay, so this is the
one. This is the one that took 11 years. This is just the clay. And then you want the other ones are in the. You want to get the other ones too?
So this is the Kunja Kirtan painting.
Right. Oh yeah, they can see that. Oh, do you want to hear about this?
Please tell us about it. Yeah.
So, this is the third verse of Vilapa Kusmanjali, where Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis, is praying to Srimati Radhika for her personal service. And he's praying that when will I have the opportunity that, no, the verse says, O Rati Manjari, when you are the most fortunate girl in this land of Vrindavan, because it was you who Radhika asked to go to the Kunj, the secluded grove, to get her waist belt, which she lost there. So why would Raghunath Das Goswami be praying to Rati Manjari, who's himself in his gopi form? It's because this verse is not actually written by Raghunath Das Goswami, although the whole book is. This is a verse stated by Rupa Goswami, who's blessing Raghunath Das Goswami, that you can write, and whatever you write, it will be successful. So the story here is that Radharani was in the Kunj. Oh, sorry. Radharani was in the Kunj with Krishna, and they were resting. And then when he was still sleeping, she came out and organized the Sankirtan festival for him, because she is the Sankirtan leader, the original Sankirtan leader.
Wow.
Of all existence. So of singing, dancing, playing musical instruments in his glorification. So then Krishna woke up, felt lonely, came out. They sat him at Radharani's feet, and then everybody started singing and dancing. And then Radharani got tired, so she sat down, and she noticed that her belt was missing. So she thought, uh-oh, my Sakis will all make fun of me if they see that it's missing. So with her eyes, she told Rati Manjari, who's here, she told Rati Manjari, quickly go and get my belt and put it on in such a way that nobody sees. So Rati Manjari stood up and she said, I'm just going to get some flowers. And then she went into the kunj or cave, got the belt. Now she's putting it on stealthily so that nobody knows, but only one person knows. And that is Sri Rupa Manjari, who's here with her head like that, because she's Rupa Goswami, and Rupa Goswami is he's the leader of all the Goswamis, the leader of our whole sampradaya.
Right.
And so Rupa Manjari knows every single eye movement that Radharani makes. She knows what Radharani's saying, so she knows what's going on, and no one else knows what's going on. So the 8 Sakis are there and 4 Manjaris are there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for explaining that. So I will put those links in the comments, and I just want to say thank you so much, Mataji, for doing this interview. I think a lot of devotees got a lot of amazing gems from it, and if anyone wants to contact you personally,
Sure.
could they do that?
Yes, they can contact me by WhatsApp. But
Okay.
unfortunately, I don't know what my WhatsApp number is because I'm technically.
Or I can give it an email address, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or you have a Facebook page as well. I think that might go to you.
But I don't go there.
Okay.
I don't put anything on it. If you contact Vasanti.
Okay. Yes, Vasanti Dasi on Facebook. If you go to her page, you'll be able to contact Mataji.
Me by email or WhatsApp or anything.
Right. Through Messenger, Facebook Messenger as well. And please go to this website and get Mataji's book and also the different art.
Speaking of the book, Vasanti just said that if anybody orders the book because of this podcast, then she'll give them free shipping in America.
Amazing. Free shipping in America and get this wonderful book. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. Please, everyone, go to the Late Morning Program Facebook page and give it a like, give it a share, and let's spread this interview far and wide. I think there were some amazing things said, some amazing gems. And again, my dandavats to you, Mataji, so much. I am just so I'm just so in awe of you, like your devotion, your tolerance, everything you've been through, but at the same time, you just come out of it so positive and so Krishna conscious, and I really appreciate that. I really do. I can't say more about it. I'm actually speechless about it.
I just want to say that when Prabhupada gave me the example that when a mother has a blind child, she loves the child so much, she calls the child lotus-eyed, Padmalochan.
Right.
So similarly, I think because of your affection for me, you send things that aren't there.
No. That's not true at all. That is not true at all. I think everyone can, from this interview, people can understand of your amazing realization in spiritual life. And I think it's very clear. But thank you so much again. Thank you to all my viewers.
So much.
Hare Krishna.
You're very merciful and kind.
You are as well. That's episode 33 with Syamarani, Jadurani, Devi Dasi, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare
Have
Krishna.
a good night. Hare Bol.